He was the king of the city, and she was the woman he'd thrown away. At the most exclusive party of the year, Gideon Holt held his new lover close, laughing about the pathetic ex-wife he'd left with nothing. He told his audience how he'd upgraded, how his life only truly began after he shed her dead weight. The crowd laughed with him, but across the glittering ballroom, the dead weight had just arrived. And she wasn't just here to serve drinks, she was here to end him, and she'd brought her father to watch. The Apex Gala, held on the 80th floor observation deck of the Viridian Tower, was not just a party, it was a coronation. And tonight, the man being crowned was Gideon Holt. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, rare orchids, and the unmistakable metallic tang of ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a sprawling, glittering Los Angeles, a kingdom of lights laid at their feet. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like ghosts, balancing trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like modern art than food. In the center of the most animated, sycophantic crowd was Gideon. At 36, he was a predator in a bespoke tuxedo. His dark hair was slicked back, and his smile, which had once been charming, had sharpened into a weapon of pure arrogance. His company, Holt Innovations, had just secured a 9-figure contract with the night's host, Blevins Tech, solidifying his status as Silicon Beach's new wunderkind. Hanging off his arm was Tinsley Rourke. Tinsley was not so much a person as a collection of expensive surfaces. Her dress was a sliver of crimson silk that seemed to defy gravity. Her lips were surgically enhanced to hold a permanent pout, and around her neck glittered a ruby necklace so large it looked heavy. "I'm just saying," Gideon brayed, his voice cutting through the polite murmur of the party, "that you have to be willing to cut bait. You can't reach the summit if you're carrying dead weight." A few of his new friends, venture capitalists and rival CEOs, nodded sagely, sipping their drinks. "You're talking about your old partner, right?" one of them, a man named Brody, asked. Gideon laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Partner? God, no, not partner. Wife. And dead weight is putting it kindly." Tinsley giggled, a sound like tiny, sharp bells. "Oh, Giddy, don't be mean. She was... What was that word you used? Quaint. Like a little garden gnome." "Exactly." Gideon snapped his fingers, delighted. "Quaint, that's it. She was quaint. She thought fiscal responsibility meant clipping coupons. She wanted me to keep the company small. Manageable. Can you imagine?" He gestured around the opulent room at the city below. "Can you imagine this manageable?" The group chuckled. Gideon leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial shout. "I'll tell you a story. True story. The week before I landed the first-round seed funding, the funding I busted my ass for, she had a panic attack, because I'd maxed out our last credit card to buy the servers we needed. She was crying, in our crappy little kitchen, saying I was gambling with her mother's inheritance. It was, 20 grand? A rounding error." "No," Tinsley gasped, placing a hand on her chest, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Yes." I looked at her. "Right then," Gideon said, his eyes hard. "And I knew she didn't have the vision. She was an anchor. So I cut the line. And look." He spun Tinsley in a little circle, her red dress flaring. "Look at the upgrade. Tinsley gets it. She inspires me. She's not afraid of success." "I'm not afraid of anything, darling," Tinsley cooed, kissing his jaw. "Except maybe bad lighting. Or," she added, her voice dripping with mock pity, "ending up like... What was her name? The garden gnome?" "Iris," Gideon said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Her name was Iris, And trust me, you'll never end up like her. I made sure of that. The woman probably works in a diner now. I honestly have no idea where she is, and I couldn't care less." He raised his glass. "To upgrades, to cutting anchors, and to Holt Innovations." "To Holt!" the group echoed, raising their glasses. Across the ballroom, hidden in the shadows near a service entrance she'd just been slipped through, a woman in a simple, elegant sapphire dress froze. Her hand, holding a single glass of water, trembled. She had heard every single word. The crappy little kitchen Gideon had mocked was the only home Iris Shaw had ever felt was truly hers. It was a third-floor walk-up in palms, with peeling linoleum and a perpetually dripping faucet. But it had a window over the sink that caught the morning light, and she had filled it with herbs. This was 5 years ago. Gideon Holt was not a king then. He was a brilliant, frantic, and desperate coder with a mountain of ideas and a valley of debt. And Iris was everything. She wasn't just his wife. She was his co-founder, his bookkeeper, his project manager, and his entire support system. The 20 grand he'd dismissed as a rounding error was $40,000, and it wasn't a small inheritance. It was every cent her mother, a quiet, hard-working librarian, had managed to save in her entire life. It was the money Iris had earmarked for a down payment on a small house, a home she could finally call her own after a childhood spent bouncing between relatives. Gideon had come to her, his eyes wild with a fire she'd mistaken for passion. "Iris, baby, this is it. This is the code that changes everything. But I need servers. I need real processing power. The VCs won't take me seriously with this laptop setup." "Gideon," she'd said, her hands twisting in her apron, "we can't. The credit cards they're gone. We're over the limit on all 3. "Who needs credit?" he'd said, grabbing her hands. His were sweating. "The house fund. That money from your mum. It's just sitting there. Iris, it's an investment. In us. In our future. Give me 6 months. Just 6 months, and I'll triple it. I'll buy you a house on the beach. I promise." She had looked at his face, so full of desperate hope, and she had caved. She transferred the money. The company, Holt Innovations, was legally formed a week later. Gideon, in a move she found efficient at the time, had her sign a ream of papers. "Just formalities, baby. You're the co-founder, but I'll be the CEO. You'll be, I don't know, chief operating officer. It's all just paper. We're in this together." Together meant Iris worked her 9-to-5 data entry job, came home, and then worked from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. managing Gideon's books, debugging his code, and writing the business proposals he was too big picture to focus on. She cooked every meal, paying for groceries in cash so it wouldn't show up on their bank statements. She was the one who stalled the landlord, who negotiated with the power company, who sold her own mother's car to make their first payroll for the 2 unpaid interns they'd hired. Gideon was the vision. Iris was the anchor, but not in the way he meant. She was the one holding the ship steady in the storm he created, the one keeping them from being dashed against the rocks. The change was slow, then sudden. The first-round seed funding came through, $1 million. It wasn't Gideon's frantic pitching that secured it. It was the meticulous 80-page business plan Iris had written, filled with market projections she'd stayed up a week straight to research. The night the money hit the bank, Gideon didn't take her to their favorite taco truck to celebrate. He took his 2 new VC buddies to a steakhouse that cost $500 a person. Iris, he'd said, should stay home and rest. He moved them out of the kitchen in Palms and into a glass-walled condo in Santa Monica. He traded his old hoodie for $2,000 Tom Ford suits. He started calling her Iris instead of baby. He stopped saying our company and started saying my company. The panic attack Gideon had described was the night she'd discovered the formalities she'd signed. He hadn't made her COO. He hadn't even made her an employee. He had registered her as a non-voting minority partner with a 5% stake, contingent on her continued spousal support. And the inheritance she'd given him? He'd filed it as a personal loan to himself, which he had paid back to himself with company funds, and then declared it forgiven. She hadn't had a panic attack. She had confronted him. You stole from me," she'd whispered, the papers shaking in her hand. "You erased me, Gideon." He hadn't even looked up from his laptop. "I built this, Iris. You typed. You made copies. Don't be dramatic. I'm the talent. I'm the brain. You were just... here." The divorce was the final humiliation. His lawyers, a team of smiling sharks, painted her as a gold-digging, unsupportive housewife. The prenup he'd slipped into the formality papers was ironclad. It stipulated that in the event of a dissolution, her 5% stake was nullified, as she had failed to provide a supportive home environment, a clause his lawyers argued was proven by her financial hysterics. She walked away with $10,000, a generous parting gift from Gideon, and her mother's maiden name, Iris Shaw. She had stood outside the courthouse, clutching a small box with her few personal belongings, and made a vow. He had taken her money, her work, and her name. He would not take her future. She would rebuild, and if she ever got the chance, she would take back what was hers, not the money, but herself, her dignity. She hadn't known her chance would come on the 80th floor of the Viridian Tower, 5 years later, with the taste of Gideon's casual cruelty still bitter on her tongue. Iris Shaw did not look like a garden gnome. She had spent the last 5 years in a crucible. The first year after Gideon, she had, in fact, worked in a diner. She'd served lattes and avocado toast at a cafe in West Hollywood, saving every single tip. She lived in a tiny studio apartment with no view and a noisy refrigerator. But Iris was brilliant. She hadn't just been debugging Gideon's code. She was a better, more meticulous, more ethical coder than he had ever been. She had a mind for systems, for seeing the flaws before they became catastrophes. She took her tips and enrolled in night courses. She got certifications. She freelanced, building a small, powerful portfolio under her new name. She was quiet, she was relentless, and she was smart. 2 years ago, she'd been hired as a junior analyst at a boutique sustainable tech firm, Pendleton Global Solutions. It was a small, unassuming company that did profoundly important work, specializing in green logistics and ethical AI. She thrived. She was promoted, then promoted again. She was now a senior project manager, and her latest project, a new carbon-neutral logistics algorithm, was the reason she was at the Apex Gala. Her company had partnered with Blevins Tech on a small subsidiary project. Her boss, a kind man named Mr. Wright, had fallen ill with the flu. He had insisted Iris go in his place. "You need to be there, Iris," he'd said, via a wheezing phone call. "Blevins is a shark, but his team respects data. Your algorithm is the data. You are the project. Go. Mingle. Just try not to let the atmosphere choke you." So here she was. She had bought her dress, a deep, sapphire blue velvet gown by a designer she admired, from a high-end consignment shop. It was worth every penny. It was elegant, powerful, and most importantly, it was hers. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, intricate chignon, and her only jewelry was a pair of simple pearl earrings, her mother's. She looked like she belonged, which is why it was so jarring when Gideon Holt the man whose entire career she had funded, had just announced to the world that she was probably serving drinks in a diner. She stood in the shadow of a colossal ice sculpture, her knuckles white on her glass of water, her heart hammering a painful rhythm against her ribs. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, coiling sickness in her stomach. She could feel the stares of the people near the service entrance. They thought she was a party crasher. Just breathe, Iris. You are not that woman anymore. You are not his anchor. You are not his victim. She forced her shoulders back, lifting her chin. She was here to do a job. She was here to represent her company and her work. She was here to find Mr. Blevins, shake his hand, and discuss the Phase 2 implementation of her algorithm. Gideon Holt was a ghost, a bad memory. She took a steadying breath and stepped out from the shadows, her modest heels making almost no sound on the polished marble floor. She scanned the crowd, looking for the telltale white hair of Lawrence Blevins. Instead, her eyes locked with his. Gideon. He was 20 feet away, still holding court, Tinsley still plastered to his side. He saw her. His eyes widened just for a fraction of a second. The laughter died on his lips. He saw her, not as the quaint gnome he'd been describing, but as the woman standing before him, poised, beautiful, and radiating a calm intensity that, for a moment, made him forget his punchline. But a bully's ego is a fragile, violent thing. Shock quickly curdled into amusement, and then into a familiar, cold contempt. He hated that she didn't look broken. He hated that she was here, in his palace, on his night. He wanted to snuff out that light. He wanted to remind her, and everyone else, exactly who she was. He smiled, a slow, reptilian smile. He put his champagne flute down on a passing tray. He took Tinsley's hand. "Gideon, darling, what is it?" Tinsley asked, confused by his sudden silence. "A ghost, my love," Gideon murmured, his eyes never leaving Iris. "A ghost from the past. Let's go say hello. We should be welcoming." He began to walk toward her, parting the crowd like a shark moving through water. Tinsley, sensing blood, trotted gleefully at his side. Iris's heart didn't pound. It went cold. It went still. She did not run. She did not look away. She simply stood her ground, her mother's pearls a cool, steady weight on her ears. The king was coming to his anchor, and she was done holding his ship. She was ready to let him sink. The space between them crackled with 5 years of unspoken history, of bitterness, of theft, and of pain. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade into a dull roar, the orchestra's strings sounding distant and thin. Gideon stopped a few feet from her. He looked her up and down, a slow, insulting appraisal. He noted the dress, the hair, the pearls. He registered expensive, but his arrogance immediately recontextualized it as desperate. Well, his voice was smooth, buttery, and laced with poison. "Iris, I have to say, I'm impressed. I didn't realize they let the catering staff mingle." A few people in their immediate orbit turned, sensing the drama. Tinsley, ever the faithful echo, let out a performative gasp. "Oh, Giddy, don't be cruel. She's not catering." She leaned in, her voice a stage whisper that carried 6 feet. "Are you, sweetie? Or did you just follow the sound of money?" Iris looked at the woman who had replaced her, a woman wearing a rock on her neck that Gideon had probably bought with the profits from Iris's work. She felt nothing. Not jealousy. Just a clinical, cold pity. "Hello, Gideon," Iris said, her voice clear and steady. It didn't waver. This, more than anything, seemed to infuriate him. "Hello, Gideon," he mimicked, turning to Tinsley. "That's all she has? After all this time, I'd have expected, I don't know, tears, begging. He turned back to Iris, his smile widening. What are you doing here, Iris? Seriously, are you lost? Did you get separated from your tour group? I'm here for work, Gideon, Iris stated simply. This was too much for Tinsley. The idea that this, nothing, could have work in a place like this was an insult. Work? Tinsley scoffed, adjusting the gaudy ruby on her collarbone. What, did you find a rich old man to be your +1? She looked around. Where is he? Hiding in the men's room? Or did you just sneak in? Gideon stepped closer, invading her personal space. He was a good 6 inches taller, and he used it, looming over her. Listen, Iris. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is my party. This is my night. You are not going to ruin it. You've taken enough from me. The audacity of the statement hit Iris like a physical blow. You've taken enough from me. She, who had been erased. She, who had funded his entire existence. A slow, dangerous anger, an anger she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 5 years, began to uncoil in her stomach. I took... From you? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Yes, you, Gideon hissed, dropping the charming facade. His face was ugly now. My time, my energy, my youth. I dragged you along for years, trying to make you see the world the way I do, and you fought me every step of the way. You were a boat anchor, Iris, and now you show up here, in that dress, trying to... What? Make me jealous? He laughed, a truly ugly sound. Look at Tinsley. Look at her. This is a woman who supports me. This is a woman who isn't afraid of success. She's not quaint. Tinsley preened. It's true. I'm his muse. She held up her hand, waggling her fingers. The engagement ring on it was a monstrosity, a cluster of diamonds so large it looked like a small galaxy. And this is what a muse gets. She looked at Iris's bare hands. What did you get, Iris? A $10,000 check and a bus ticket out of his life? That's what Gideon told me. He said it was the best money he ever spent. The circle around them had widened. Everyone was watching. Gideon Holt, the man of the hour, was verbally eviscerating some poor, unknown woman. It was spectacular. Iris felt the stares like pinpricks, the humiliation, the shame. It was all there, bubbling up, threatening to drown her. This is what he wanted. He wanted her to cry. He wanted her to scream. He wanted her to make a scene so he could have security throw her out. He wanted to prove to his audience that she was, and always had been, the dead weight. Iris took a slow breath. She closed her eyes for a single second. She pictured the kitchen in palms. She pictured the formality papers. She pictured the look on his face when he'd told her she was just here. She opened her eyes. The anger was gone, replaced by something far colder. A diamond-hard resolve. That's a lovely necklace, Tinsley, Iris said, her voice completely calm. Tinsley and Gideon both blinked, thrown by the non sequitur. Thank you, Tinsley said, her hand flying to the ruby. It's the Matisse ruby. Gideon got it for me from an auction in Geneva. It's practically priceless. Priceless, Iris repeated, nodding slowly. I see. She looked at Gideon. You always did have a taste for things that looked expensive, Gideon, even when you were paying for them with other people's money. Gideon's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're out of your league. You're a minnow, Iris. And this is the ocean. Maybe, Iris said. Or maybe you're just a shark who's been swimming in a kiddie pool for so long you've forgotten what a real predator looks like. Is that a threat? Gideon scoffed. From you. You're going to... What? Write a bad Yelp review about my company? No, Iris said, a small, tiny smile playing on her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm just here for work. She turned to walk away, but Gideon, enraged that she was getting the last word, that she hadn't broken, grabbed her arm. Not hard, but firmly, a proprietary, controlling gesture he had used 100 times before. We're not done here, he growled. Get your hand off me, Gideon, Iris said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. Or what? You'll call security? No, a new voice said. A voice that was deep, powerful, and carried the effortless authority of generations of wealth. She'll have me do it. Gideon, Iris, and Tinsley all turned. Just then, the orchestra stopped, the lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a single bright spotlight hit the stage at the far end of the room. Lawrence Blevins, the CEO of Blevins Tech, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, innovators, welcome to the Apex Gala. Gideon, flustered, let go of Iris's arm as if it were burning. The moment was broken. But as he turned toward the stage, preening for what he assumed would be his introduction, Iris looked past him to the man who had spoken. He was standing near the stage, perfectly tailored, in his late 60s, with a shock of silver hair and eyes as blue and cold as a glacier. He had watched the entire exchange. He nodded, once, to Iris, a subtle, supportive gesture. Iris nodded back. Gideon, oblivious, was composing his face into one of humble genius, ready for his name to be called. What a night! Lawrence Blevins boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing across the silent, cavernous room. Blevins was a man who looked perpetually stressed, a thin veneer of joviality poorly concealing a core of raw panic. Tonight we celebrate the future, Blevins continued, spreading his arms wide. And the future is innovation, the future is daring, the future is partnership. Gideon straightened his tie. Tinsley squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with reflected glory. This was it. We at Blevins Tech have always prided ourselves on finding the next big thing, Blevins said, his eyes scanning the crowd. And this year, we found a titan, a man whose vision is matched only by his tenacity, a man who is poised to change the world of biotech as we know it. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the man of the hour, the COO of Holt Innovations, Mr. Gideon Holt. A wave of thunderous applause broke out. Gideon, his face a mask of practiced humility, raised a hand to the crowd. He kissed Tinsley, a public, performative kiss, and began his short walk toward the stage. He even shot a smug, triumphant smirk back over his shoulder at Iris. See? I'm the king. You're nothing. Iris just watched him go, her expression unreadable. Gideon bounded up the 2 steps to the stage and shook Blevins' hand, pulling him into a one-armed bro hug. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Gideon said, taking the microphone. I'm truly humbled. He wasn't. He launched into a 5-minute speech he had clearly memorized, full of buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and paradigm shift. He talked about his vision, his hard work, his sleepless nights. He never once mentioned a partner, a team, or a wife who'd sold her mother's car to keep his lights on. Iris watched, not with anger, but with a strange, clinical detachment. He was exactly who he had always been. The only difference was that now, everyone else could see it too. And so, Gideon concluded, I accept this partnership with Blevins Tech not as an ending, but as a beginning, the beginning of a new era. Thank you. More applause. Gideon soaked it in, raising his hands like a conquering hero. He handed the mic back to Blevins and remained on stage, basking in the spotlight. Thank you, Gideon. Thank you, Blevins said, clapping him on the back. "A true visionary, a true friend." Gideon beamed. "But," Blevins continued, and the energy in the room shifted. As Gideon himself said, he's the next big thing. But even the next big thing stands on the shoulders of giants, and tonight we are honored, truly, truly humbled, to have the giant in the room with us. Gideon's smile faltered. He hadn't been expecting a follow-up act. We at Blevins Tech, and indeed, Gideon's company, Holt Innovations, have been the recipients of let's call it a guiding hand, a force in the world of global industry so powerful, yet so quiet, that most of us are unaware of its influence. This man, this benefactor, believes in the future of innovation. Blevins was sweating now, reading nervously from his note card. He requested no fanfare, but I simply cannot let the night pass without acknowledging the true architect of this new partnership, the man whose quiet, majority-stake acquisition of Blevins Tech just last month made this all possible. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the chairman and CEO of Pendleton Global, Mr. Arthur Pendleton. The applause was hesitant at first, then deafening as the name sunk in. Pendleton Global. Gideon's blood ran cold. Pendleton Global wasn't a guiding hand. It was the Iron Fist, a multi-trillion-dollar conglomerate that dealt in shipping, logistics, biotech, and, as rumor had it, the quiet purchasing and dismantling of entire nations. They were a myth, an urban legend. Gideon had never heard of a man named Arthur Pendleton. He'd always assumed Pendleton was just a name on a building. The crowd parted. The man Iris had seen earlier, the older, silver-haired man with the glacial blue eyes, walked toward the stage. He moved with a quiet, unhurried grace, his bespoke suit fitting him like a second skin. He didn't bound up the steps, he ascended them as if they were his by right. He shook Blevins' hand, a quick, dismissive gesture, and then stood next to Gideon. The contrast was brutal. Gideon, who had looked so imposing moments before, suddenly looked like a cheap imitation, a boy in his father's suit. Arthur Pendleton took the microphone. He didn't tap it. He didn't adjust it. He simply spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Blevins. That was more than I asked for." His voice was a low, cultivated baritone, a transatlantic accent that could have been from nowhere and everywhere. Blevins Tech is a fine company. Holt Innovations shows promise. He held the promise for a beat, letting it hang in the air, making it sound more like an accusation than a compliment. Pendleton Global believes in the future. We are investing heavily in this sector. We trust Mr. Blevins will continue to manage his division with the same diligence he has always shown. It was a clear, unmistakable message. You work for me? Blevins' face went pale, but he nodded, his fake smile plastered on. Thank you for your hospitality. Arthur finished. He hadn't spoken for more than 30 seconds. He handed the microphone back to a trembling Blevins. The spotlight was still on the three of them. Gideon, desperate to re-establish his dominance, stuck out his hand. Mr. Pendleton, sir. Gideon Holt. It is an unbelievable honor. I had no idea. I am so looking forward to working with you. Our vision. Arthur Pendleton looked at Gideon's outstretched hand for a long, cold second. He did not take it. Instead, he looked past Gideon, past the Klieg lights, into the darkness of the crowd. His icy blue eyes scanned the room, searching. He found what he was looking for. He stepped past Gideon, ignoring him completely. He walked to the edge of the stage, his gaze locked on one person. Iris. He descended the steps, landing silently on the marble. The The crowd, sensing the climax of a drama they didn't understand, parted for him. He walked, not to Blevins, not to his new executive team, but straight through the heart of the party. Gideon and Tinsley watched, frozen in a tableau of confusion and dawning horror. Arthur Pendleton stopped directly in front of Iris Shaw. The silence in the 8,000-square-foot ballroom was absolute. You could hear the clink of an ice cube in a glass 100 feet away. He looked at her, his stern, imposing face breaking into a smile of such genuine, breathtaking warmth that it transformed him. "You're late," he said, his voice just for her. But in the silence, it carried. Iris smiled back, a real, radiant smile. "The traffic was terrible," she said. He reached out and gently brushed a stray wisp of hair from her cheek. "You look beautiful, my dear. Your mother would have been so proud." He held out his arm. Iris took it. And then Arthur Pendleton, the most powerful man in the room, kissed her on the forehead. "Hello, Dad," Iris said. G. Diane's jaw dropped. The champagne flute he had just reclaimed from a passing tray slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Tinsley's perfectly painted mouth formed a silent, ugly "Oh." "Dad?" Gideon croaked, the word a dry rattle in his throat. Arthur Pendleton's warm smile vanished, replaced by the glacial mask. He turned, his arm linked protectively with Iris's, and fixed Gideon Holt with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. "Mr. Holt," Arthur said, his voice lethally soft, "I've heard so much about you. From my daughter. Iris, Pendleton, Shaw." The shatter of Gideon's glass was the only sound in the world. It was a gunshot, a starting pistol, an executioner's bell. Every eye in the room was on them. Gideon, Tinsley, Iris, and the titan of industry who had just called her daughter. Gideon's brain was a screaming white void. Pendleton, Iris Pendleton, Iris Pendleton. Shaw. Shaw was her mother's name, the librarian. He had checked. He had. But I don't understand, Gideon stammered, a pathetic, wheezing sound. "Iris, your last name. My name is Iris Shaw," Iris said, her voice ringing with a new, reinforced clarity. She was no longer a ghost. She was a pillar. "I took my mother's name when I left you. I always preferred it. I never saw the need to use my father's. I wanted to build something on my own. Without this," she gestured vaguely at the opulence, the power, the man standing next to her. And she did. Arthur Pendleton's voice cut in, sharp as a diamond. He stepped slightly in front of Iris, a subtle, protective gesture. "She built a life. She built a career. She built an algorithm that, I must say, is the only truly valuable piece of intellectual property Blevins Tech has acquired this quarter." Lawrence Blevins, who had scurried off the stage, now reappeared, his face the color of old oatmeal. "Mr. Pendleton, sir, and Ms. Shaw, a pleasure, a wonderful surprise. We are thrilled to have you here." Arthur ignored him. His focus was entirely, predatorily, on Gideon. "Mr. Holt," Arthur said, "I am a man who believes in data. I like to know the variables in my investments. So when my daughter's company, Pendleton Global Solutions, a small R&D division I set up for her, which she has, I'm proud to say, made profitable in 2 years, was folded into the Blevins deal, I looked into all of Blevins' new partners." He took a step closer. Gideon, involuntarily, took a step back. "You," Arthur said, "were a fascinating variable." Gideon was sweating, his expensive tuxedo suddenly hot and tight. "Sir, I can explain. Iris and I, it was a long time ago. We were young. These things." "Were you young?" When you took her mother's $40,000 inheritance? Arthur asked. The crowd gasped. Tinsley's head whipped toward Gideon. An inheritance, Arthur continued, his voice a relentless, prosecuting hammer, that she had explicitly earmarked for a home. Were you young when you convinced her to invest it in your vision? It was an investment, Gideon pleaded, his voice cracking. I paid it back. Oh, you did, Arthur agreed, a horrifyingly pleasant smile on his face. I saw the books. My forensic accountants are very thorough. You paid it back to yourself. You filed it as a personal loan from yourself to the company, then used company funds, her money, to reimburse yourself. Tax-free. It was quite clever. And as my legal team has confirmed, highly illegal. It's called fraud, Mr. Holt. Specifically, fraud by deception and spousal asset misappropriation. Gideon's world was tilting. No, the divorce, the settlement, it's all settled. You mean the prenuptial agreement? Arthur raised an eyebrow. The one you had her sign while telling her it was just a formality. The one that disqualified her from her 5% equity because she failed to provide a supportive home environment. My lawyers loved that part. They, in fact, have a counterfile. It's 300 pages long, and it details, with bank statements and server logs, that Iris Shaw, or Pendleton, as she was then, was not only your supportive environment, she was your co-founder, your lead coder, and your chief strategist. You didn't cut the anchor, Mr. Holt. You were the anchor. She was the one sailing the ship. Gideon couldn't breathe. He looked at Iris, his eyes wide with a new, terrified respect. This wasn't the quaint gnome. This was an executioner. Iris, why? He whispered. Why are you doing this? Iris, who had been silent, finally stepped forward. Her father's presence was her armor, but the words were her own. Why? She repeated, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a terrible, righteous anger. You stood on that stage, Gideon. You stood there tonight, in front of the world, and you called me dead weight. You mocked me. You laughed about my mother's money. She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. You didn't just divorce me, Gideon. You tried to erase me. You tried to convince me, and the world, that I was nothing. You built your entire kingdom on my bones. You thought I was gone. You thought I was working in a diner. I did work in a diner, Iris said, her voice ringing out. For a year. I saved my tips, Gideon. I saved every single one, and I rebuilt my life. My life. Not my father's. Mine. I am here tonight, not as Arthur Pendleton's daughter. I am here as the senior project manager for a PGS initiative I created. I am here because I am better than you. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. Gideon was broken. He was a shell. He had been so thoroughly, surgically dismantled that there was nothing left to say. But the execution wasn't over. Tinsley Rourke, who had been watching this all unfold, wasn't stupid. She was a creature of pure survival, and she saw her diamond-encrusted life raft sinking. She took a step away from Gideon. "Giddy," she said, her voice trembling. Is that true? Did you lie to me?" Gideon looked at her, desperate for an ally. "Tinsley, baby, this is a misunderstanding." But Tinsley's gaze had shifted. It had slid from Gideon's ruined face to Arthur Pendleton's impassive one. She saw the true power in the room. "Oh, Mr. Pendleton," she gushed, suddenly detaching her arm from Gideon's as if he were diseased. This is just awful. I had no idea. Gideon told me. He said she was... Oh, this is just terrible. I feel so used." She was switching horses midstream. It was a valiant, if disgusting, effort. Arthur Pendleton, however, was not amused. He looked at Tinsley. His eyes dropped, just for a second, to the massive, gaudy ruby at her throat. "Miss Rourke," he said, his voice flat. "Yes. Yes, sir," she said, perking up, her smile bright and desperate. "That's a lovely necklace." Tinsley beamed. "Oh, thank you. It's the Matisse ruby from Geneva. Well, Gideon said it's priceless." "It is," Arthur agreed. "The real one, that is. It's currently on loan from my private vault to the Met. It's a remarkable stone, famous for its pigeon blood colour, and for the small, carbon fleck inclusion just to the left of the primary facet. A beautiful imperfection." He paused. Tinsley's smile was frozen. Arthur continued. "Yours is perfect, flawless, not a single inclusion, a truly remarkable fake. It's a very high-quality cubic zirconia, I'm sure, but it's not the Matisse ruby." The colour drained from Tinsley's face. She didn't look at Arthur. She didn't look at the crowd. She turned, her entire body vibrating with a fury that eclipsed all reason, and stared at Gideon. "Fake!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing through the 80th floor. You lying bastard! You told me it was real! You bought me a fake ruby?" Gideon, who had been metaphorically executed, was now facing a literal assault. Treating up with perfectly manicured, claw-like nails, Tinsley Rourke tore the necklace from her own throat. The clasp snapped. Heavy glass, rubies, and diamonds sprayed across the marble floor, skittering like cheap gravel. "You are nothing!" she screamed at him, her face a mask of makeup-streaked rage. "A broke, lying anchor." And with that, she turned and stormed away, pushing through the stunned crowd, her crimson dress whipping behind her. Gideon Holt was left alone. Utterly, completely, and spectacularly alone. He stood in the wreckage of his life, surrounded by whispers, fake jewels, and the shattered pieces of a champagne flute. The high, shrieking echo of Tinsley's rage seemed to suck all the air out of the 80th floor ballroom. The clack-clack-clack of her retreating heels on the marble was a countdown to the end. And then, silence. A vacuum. It lasted for 3, 4, 5 seconds. Then the whispers started. It was not a murmur. It was the sound of 100 small, sharp knives being drawn. It was the sound of reputations being carved up, of fortunes shifting, of social execution. It was the sound of vultures realizing the lion was dead. Gideon Holt stood alone in a circle of ruin. The metaphorical spotlight that had been his anointing was now a harsh, unforgiving interrogation lamp. He was physically present, but he was already a ghost. His face, which had been flushed with rage, was now a waxy putty grey. A single bead of sweat traced a path from his temple, carving a line through his panic-dampened skin. His eyes were not on Iris. They were not on the crowd. They were on the floor, fixed on a large, glittering piece of red-tinted glass, the Matisse ruby. A fake. It had all been fake. His company, his lover, his status, all of it. A high-quality cubic zirconia, and the man who knew the difference was now standing 10 feet away, holding the arm of the woman he had tried to destroy. He was a king, and he had just realized his entire kingdom was made of cardboard. Iris watched him. The terrible coiled serpent of anger that had lived in her stomach for 5 years, the one that had thrashed to life when he grabbed her arm, was finally still. It hadn't been vanquished in a blaze of glory. It had simply uncoiled, sighed, and dissolved. She felt no triumph. She felt no giddy, vindictive joy. She felt nothing. Just the vast, quiet, profound emptiness of a great weight being set down. The debt was paid, the books were balanced. She was finally free. Her father, Arthur Pendleton, felt the shift in her. The tension left her shoulders. He put his arm around her, a solid, grounding weight. "Let's go home, Iris," he said, his voice a low rumble, meant only for her. "I believe your work here is done." He was right. It was over. She had done what she came to do, and so much more. She nodded, ready to turn, ready to walk away from this room, this city, this entire chapter of her life. But as she took her first step, her gaze snagged on something. A face in the crowd. Not a sycophant. Not a rival. It was a young woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, standing alone near a wilting floral arrangement. She was in a simple black dress, holding a tablet to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide, and she was staring at Iris, not with pity or morbid curiosity, but with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. Iris knew that woman. Not her name, but her. An hour ago, before Gideon's speech, Iris had seen her. The young woman had been trying to show her tablet to a dismissive Lawrence Blevins, while Gideon and his cronies looked on, smirking. "Predictive behavioral modeling?" Gideon had said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sweetheart, that's adorable. Why don't you go get us all some more champagne? That's a predictive behavior I can get behind." The young woman had flushed crimson and shrunk away. Gideon had made a career of crushing people. He'd done it to that woman. He had done it, most brutally, to Iris. And in that moment, Iris realized her work wasn't quite done. The destruction was finished. But the point of it all was just beginning. "Wait," Iris said. Arthur stopped, looking at her with a questioning eyebrow. Iris stepped away from her father's protective embrace. She was no longer a victim being shielded. She was a power, moving on her own. She did not look at Gideon. She did not acknowledge his presence. She simply walked past him, as if he were a statue, a piece of furniture, an irrelevant obstacle. The crowd, sensing a new, final act, went silent again. Gideon, hollowed out, saw her move. He looked up, his eyes empty, and watched her approach the young woman in the black dress. He didn't understand. Iris stopped in front of the woman, who looked for a moment like she might faint. Your work," Iris said, her voice clear and kind, yet ringing with an authority that was new to her, but fit perfectly. "The predictive behavioral modeling. I saw your abstract when my team was doing due diligence on Blevins R&D. You did?" the young woman stammered, her knuckles white on her tablet. "Yes. Your code for saturated networks. It was more than adorable. It was elegant." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. He said, I know what he said," Iris said, and for the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was a smile of alliance. Men like him, small men, are terrified of elegant code. They'd rather it serve drinks than show them up. She reached into the small, sapphire blue clutch she carried. She pulled out a simple, thick-cut cream business card. Iris Shaw, Senior Project Manager, Head of Ethical Logistics, Pendleton Global Solutions. She held it out. The young woman took it as if it were a holy relic. "My division is hiring," Iris said. "We're not looking for visionaries. We're looking for architects, people who want to build something real, something that works." She tapped the woman's tablet. "Email me on Monday. We'll have lunch." I will," the woman whispered, a look of fierce, dawning hope on her face. "Thank you, Mrs. Shaw." "Thank you. We'll see," Iris said, with a kind nod. "Now, go get a real drink. You've earned it." She turned. And now, finally, she had to walk past Gideon to get to her father. He was still there, frozen, having watched the entire exchange. He had watched her, in his moment of ultimate defeat, poach the talent he had been too arrogant to even see. He had watched her build, effortlessly, in the smoking ruins of his life. He finally understood. This wasn't just revenge, this was a replacement. She stopped, just for a moment, directly in front of him. He flinched. His eyes, no longer hollow, were now pleading. Why, Iris? Why all this? She gave him his answer. Her voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was the cool, calm, dispassionate voice of an auditor delivering a final, damning report. You were right about one thing, Gideon, she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean in, desperate for the words. You said I was a boat anchor. You were right, I was. For years I was the only thing holding you up. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the fake gems, the room full of new enemies. I was the anchor, keeping your ship from showing the world what it truly was. From sinking under the weight of your own arrogance, and now... She held his gaze, and in her eyes he saw not a trace of the woman he'd known. He saw only a vast, cold, empty ocean. You're not a king, you're not a titan, you're just a bad investment. She didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing left to say. She turned her back on him. She walked the last 10 feet to her father, who was watching her with a look of profound, immeasurable pride. She took his arm. Together, the daughter who had been erased and the father who had moved the world to find her, walked away. They did not look back. The crowd, a sea of stunned, respectful faces, parted for them. They walked through the ballroom, out of the spotlight, and toward the elevators, their steps silent, their departure absolute. Gideon Holt was left alone on the 80th floor. The music, a thin, reedy string quartet, tried to restart, but it sounded like a funeral dirge. His contract would be voided by 9 a.m., his accounts frozen by noon. The name Holt Innovations would be a punchline by evening. The king was dead, and the quaint little garden gnome had just inherited the kingdom, and just like that, the empire built on lies came crashing down. Gideon learned the hard way that the people you step on your way up are the same ones you meet on your way down, especially when one of them owns the building. Iris didn't just get her revenge, she got her life back, proving that the best comeback is building an empire of your own, on your own terms. What did you think of Iris's ultimate move? Was Gideon's downfall an even 10-10-10? Or was Tinsley screaming about the fake necklace the most satisfying part? Let me know your favorite moment of karmic justice down in the comments. And if you love stories where the dead weight turns out to be the one holding all the power, then you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to see a bully get what's coming to them, and subscribe to the channel. We post new dramatic stories every single week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.
Wealthy millionaire abandons pregnant wife during delivery. Mistress shows up to take his place. Picture a hospital corridor echoing with desperate footsteps, a woman's anguished cries filling the sterile air. Her name is Eleanor Harrington, a once glowing mother to be on the brink of giving birth. But tonight, her husband, the wealthy and seemingly untouchable Christopher Harrington, is nowhere to be found. In his place stands a mysterious woman whose very presence threatens to unravel everything. Elena thought she knew about her marriage. This is the haunting story of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption, where masks fall away and true intentions are revealed, one painful heartbeat at a time. Brace yourself for a tale that proves money can't buy loyalty, or love. Elena Harrington was the quintessential example of grace. Even before she married Christopher Harrington, a millionaire businessman known for his ruthless yet successful expansion of Harrington Enterprises across North America, Elena had an elegance that could not be manufactured. Raised in a small town called Willow Creek, she was the pride and joy of her parents, Margaret and Peter Redwood. From a young age, she displayed an uncanny ability to see the good in people, a quality that shone through her warm brown eyes. Christopher, on the other hand, was the picture of modern success, a tall, confident man with sharp features and impeccably tailored suits. His father, George Harrington, had left him an almost flawless blueprint for business success, but Christopher enhanced it, building a remarkable business empire that spanned multiple industries from real estate to high-tech startups. When they first met at a charity ball in Manhattan, Elena was volunteering as an organizer for the Redwood Foundation, a small philanthropic group started by her aunt, Cynthia Redwood. She was handing out brochures while simultaneously making sure the event ran smoothly. Christopher was intrigued by her serene efficiency. He introduced himself politely, and though he received countless flirtatious smiles from socialites that evening, the only moment that truly lingered in his memory was the one when Elena hesitated before taking his hand. Her demure smile was as genuine as it was cautious, and it was in that precise moment that Christopher decided he had to know more about her. Over the ensuing months, the two dated discreetly. Elena, not one to be dazzled easily by wealth, found herself slowly charmed by Christopher's seemingly genuine devotion to her charitable causes. He donated significant sums to Willow Creek's public library and even purchased new instruments for the local school band she once played in. At the time, she believed these gestures were signs of an empathetic heart. Little did she know that behind every act of generosity, Christopher kept an unstated tally. When they married in an extravagant ceremony in Napa Valley, the local newspapers raved about the fairy tale wedding of the Harrington prince and the Redwood princess. Elena's wedding gown, a simple yet stunning dress designed by an up-and-coming friend, Camilla Donovan, contrasted with the lavish environment. Christopher made sure every detail of that day screamed opulence, from the 1,000 white roses at the altar to the caviar-laden reception. But for Elena, the wedding's highlight was the laughter of her parents and the heartfelt speech given by her beloved Aunt Cynthia, who had helped raise her. She thought life could not get any better. The first 2 years of marriage glided by smoothly. They traveled to Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. Elena wanted to see the world beyond lavish hotels, often opting to visit children's shelters in remote villages. Christopher obliged her in the beginning, occasionally rolling his eyes, but rarely refusing. For a time, they seemed like a philanthropic power couple, with Elena championing charitable endeavors and Christopher funding them. It was in the 3rd year of marriage that Elena discovered she was pregnant. Overjoyed, she imagined a future in which her child would grow up in a home filled with warmth, guided by the same moral compass she treasured so deeply. Christopher's reaction was subdued excitement. He kissed her softly on the forehead and mentioned that, finally, the Harrington name would have an heir. Looking back, Elena noticed a fleeting shadow in his eyes that night, something akin to reluctant acceptance, rather than unbridled joy. She dismissed her unease, attributing it to the stress of balancing pregnancy with her blossoming charitable work. She believed Christopher loved her, and that love would carry them both through any challenges, no matter how unexpected or severe. That was the Elena from Willow Creek, the girl with a heart big enough for the world. That same heart, however, was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. 2 months into her pregnancy, Elena began experiencing severe morning sickness. She frequently felt dizzy, often needing to lie down for hours. She visited Dr. Miranda Quince at Redwood Medical Center, who advised her to maintain a diet rich in nutrients and to avoid stress whenever possible. "Stress is the worst thing you can introduce to a pregnancy right now," Dr. Quince warned softly, scanning Elena's medical charts. "You need rest, Elena. Your body is telling you to slow down." Christopher's business life, however, was ramping up. Profits soared, and with them came an increase in trips, late-night meetings, and urgent phone calls that required him to dash out of their bedroom at 2 in the morning. Where once he would comfort Elena, gently rubbing her back and holding her hand through her bouts of nausea, now he seemed distant. And then there was her first glimpse of doubt one late evening when Christopher returned from a business meeting with a faint trace of a floral perfume that Elena did not recognize. She jokingly asked him if he had visited a flower shop. He laughed it off, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. "You worry too much," he said, brushing off any further queries with a gentle wave of his hand. The next morning, while sorting through the laundry, Elena discovered a lipstick smudge on Christopher's collar. It was the shade of burgundy, quite different from the rose pink she herself occasionally wore. Her heart pounded in her chest. She asked him about it that evening. His answer was swift, a crisp denial. "I have no idea where that came from. The meeting was at the Redwood City Board. I was around men in suits, not women with lipstick." He tossed the shirt into the laundry bin, ignoring Elena's concerned gaze. In that moment, she couldn't tell what frightened her more, the possibility that he was lying or the calm ease with which he dismissed her concerns. Elena wanted to believe him, to trust that her husband wouldn't betray her. After all, they had pledged their lives to each other. She convinced herself that the lipstick smudge was a random accident, a brush against someone's face in a crowded corridor, or perhaps an unfortunate stain from an earlier meeting. She wanted to preserve her peace of mind, especially now that she carried their child. Yet the seed of suspicion was planted. Over the next few weeks, Christopher's behavior became more erratic. He would shower the moment he arrived home, sometimes rushing past Elena without so much as a greeting. He insisted on separate finances, a strange request, given their shared marriage. He told Elena he wanted to protect her from the complexities of the business world, but she couldn't help feeling he was building walls where there used to be bridges. A chance meeting with her close friend, Amelia Dunbar, heightened Elena's concerns. Amelia worked in marketing for one of Christopher's companies. At an office party, she had seen Christopher engrossed in a private conversation with a striking woman named Vanessa Quinn. According to Amelia, Vanessa was an up-and-coming event coordinator who had secured multiple contracts with Harrington Enterprises. Amelia's tone had been hesitant, clearly worried about fueling rumors, but Elena's heart sank at the mention of Vanessa's name. And so, as her belly grew, so did her reservations about Christopher's loyalty. On some nights, Elena lay awake, one hand on her abdomen, feeling the baby's gentle kicks, reminders of the life she was fighting to protect. She wondered if her child would have both parents' unwavering love, or if she would be forced to navigate motherhood alone. She prayed that her fears were unfounded, that Christopher was still the man she fell in love with. Little did she know that fate was about to reveal truths far crueler than her imagination could conjure. By the time Elena was 7 months pregnant, she had endured weeks of lonely dinners, unanswered phone calls, and vague text messages from Christopher. He was traveling more than ever, citing big expansion deals in Chicago and Los Angeles. Though Elena wanted to trust him, she felt an ever-growing distance, the kind that made her cry softly into her pillow whenever she thought about the future. One stormy evening, while Christopher was supposedly in Chicago, Elena received a frantic call from Amelia. She could barely make out her friend's words through the crackle of static. Something about Vanessa Christopher restaurant in Midtown. Despite Amelia's incoherence, Elena felt her blood run cold. She remembered that Christopher had specifically told her he'd be gone for 3 days. Yet there was a possibility he was still in town, enjoying a cozy dinner with someone else. Weighed down by panic, Elena told Amelia she couldn't go out in the storm. She was heavily pregnant and feeling ill that evening. But Amelia insisted, urging Elena to see the truth for herself. Torn between the safety of her unborn child and the gnawing desperation to know what her husband was doing, Elena made a fateful decision. She grabbed her coat and an umbrella, called a taxi, and headed for Midtown. Rain lashed the car windows as the taxi sped along the slick roads. Elena's heart pounded relentlessly. As the vehicle drew closer to the address Amelia had given her, she recalled the early days of their love story. She pictured Christopher's warm smile, the gentle way he used to tuck a stray strand of her hair behind her ear. Was all of that just an illusion? The taxi stopped in front of an upscale restaurant. Through the glass walls, she saw Christopher seated at a dimly lit corner table. Opposite him sat a stunning woman with cascading raven hair, Vanessa Quinn. In that moment, any doubt Elena might have clung to evaporated. The two were laughing in a manner far too intimate to be just colleagues. Vanessa reached out and placed her hand gently over Christopher's. He did not pull away. Elena remained frozen in the rain for a few seconds, her body trembling with shock. A part of her wanted to march into the restaurant, confront him, scream at him, demand an explanation. But then the baby kicked a visceral reminder of her delicate state. She realized with a bolt of clarity that her well-being and that of her child took precedence over the tempest of anger surging within her. She retreated to the taxi, tears mingling with the downpour. That night, she experienced her first panic attack, gasping for air as the taxi sped back to the Harrington mansion. The driver, alarmed, offered to take her straight to the hospital, but Elena insisted she would be okay. A part of her was still in denial, clinging to the last shreds of hope that there was some explanation for Christopher's behavior other than betrayal. Over the next week, Elena's world felt hollow. She avoided Christopher's calls, ignoring his messages about unexpected flight delays and impossible meetings. She spent her days in bed or at Dr. Quincy's office, checking on the baby. She said little to her parents, not wanting them to worry, and she asked Aunt Cynthia for quiet support. Refusing to share the specifics, she felt alone, terribly, irrevocably alone. But the worst revelation was yet to come. A few days later, while rummaging through the desk in Christopher's home office for some insurance papers, Elena stumbled upon a receipt for a lavish diamond bracelet purchased at a boutique known for custom engravings. The receipt was dated the same day Christopher claimed to be in Chicago. At the bottom of the receipt, in neat script, was a note, "Engrave with to Vanessa, forever yours." Elena's entire body went numb. Here was undeniable proof of Christopher's affair, solid, objective, and crushing. All illusions crumbled as she sank to the floor, clutching the receipt. Her marriage was a lie. Everything she believed about their partnership, their life together, their future, was tainted. And she was 8 months pregnant. The timing couldn't have been worse. 2 weeks after discovering the engraved bracelet receipt, Elena went into premature labor. She had been alone in the mansion's library, attempting to distract herself with a novel, when a sudden, sharp pain seized her lower abdomen. At first, she tried to breathe through it, remembering Dr. Quincy's advice. But within minutes, the pain intensified and became more frequent. Instinctively, she reached for her phone to call Christopher, only to recall that earlier in the day, he had texted her he was flying to Los Angeles for an urgent business deal. She tried calling him anyway, no answer. She tried again, voicemail. In despair, she dialed her mother, Margaret Redwood. A wave of calm relief flooded her momentarily as her mother picked up on the first ring, but the motherly concern in Margaret's tone only amplified Elena's fear. "Elena, I'm coming right now," her mother said. "Your father and I are already on our way. Hold on, darling." It felt like an eternity before the ambulance arrived. Elena was doubled over in pain, sweat pouring down her forehead. The paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, their voices urgent yet professional. But the ride to Redwood Medical Center was a blur of bright lights and terror. During this entire chaos, Elena's phone remained stubbornly silent. She wanted to scream at Christopher's absence, to curse him for abandoning her at her most vulnerable moment. Yet all she could do was clutch her belly, praying for the safety of her unborn child. Upon arriving at the hospital, Elena was rushed into the maternity ward. Nurses and doctors bustled around her, hooking her up to monitors. "Doctor!" Quincy's face appeared, her expression both reassuring and grave. "Elena, you're in preterm labor," she announced gently. "We'll do everything we can to ensure both you and the baby are safe." As the contractions intensified, Elena felt a rush of warmth. Her water had broken. Fear seized her. She was not ready, physically or emotionally. She needed her husband by her side, encouraging her, reassuring her. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that Christopher was neither present nor reachable. An hour into her labor, Elena felt an almost surreal calm come over her, as if her body had taken over. She shut her eyes, focusing on the breathing techniques she had practiced. She remembered the birthing classes she had attended alone after Christopher had once again claimed urgent meetings. Determination flared in her. If she was going to bring her child into the world, she would do it fiercely, with or without Christopher. A nurse dashed into the room, saying that a woman had arrived, claiming to be her guest. Elena expected her mother, but the nurse's description didn't match Margaret Redwood at all. Instead, the nurse described a tall, raven-haired woman in a sleek black coat, Vanessa Quinn. Elena's heart almost stopped. She clenched her jaw, fighting a wave of anger that threatened to engulf her. Why on earth would Vanessa Quinn be here at such a moment? A swirl of questions and confusion clouded Elena's mind. If Christopher had told Vanessa about the premature labor, why wasn't he here himself? Then, to everyone's shock, Vanessa strode into the room, ignoring the disapproving looks from the medical staff. Her face was a picture of feigned concern. She tried to say something, but before she could speak, Margaret Redwood and Peter Redwood appeared behind her, their expressions a mix of outrage and bewilderment. The tension in the small hospital room was palpable, but Elena was beyond words. Another contraction seized her, sending her into a vortex of pain. "Doctor," Quince ordered Vanessa and anyone who wasn't immediate family to step out. Margaret approached, taking Elena's hand in hers. The paternal strength in Peter's face was unwavering as he stood on the other side of the bed. They offered comfort while the medical staff prepared for an urgent delivery. Amid the chaos, nurses shouting vital stats, Dr. Quince guiding Elena to push a chilling realization settled in Elena's mind. She was truly alone in her marriage. The father of her child had abandoned her, and his mistress was present when he was not. The minutes felt like hours as Elena battled through her contractions. Each push tore at her, both physically and emotionally. She could hear her mother's soothing whispers, her father's firm yet gentle encouragement. "Doctor," Quince repeatedly reassured her that the baby's heartbeat was strong, that everything would be okay. But Elena was haunted by the vision of Vanessa's face, the gall, the cruelty of that woman showing up unannounced, offering some twisted form of support. At last, after what seemed like an endless ordeal, a high-pitched cry filled the room. Elena exhaled a sob of relief as a nurse announced, "It's a boy." She caught a glimpse of tiny arms and legs, a swirl of newborn energy wrapped in pastel hospital blankets. Despite the heartbreak, a rush of love and gratitude flooded her. For that singular moment, everything else vanished. But reality intruded quickly. The baby was whisked away to be checked by the neonatal team because he was a bit premature. Dr. Quince assured Elena that they just wanted to make sure the baby's lungs were functioning well, given his early arrival. Exhausted, Elena collapsed against the pillows, tears trailing down her cheeks as she whispered her baby's name for the first time. "Ethan, my sweet Ethan." Margaret pressed a kiss to Elena's forehead. "He's going to be fine, my love." Peter Redwood nodded, his eyes moist with grandfatherly pride. Elena felt safe in their presence, at least for a fleeting second. Then, with a jolt, Elena remembered Vanessa. She looked toward the door, where a nurse was having a hushed conversation with the intruder. Vanessa seemed agitated, gesturing as though demanding something. It was surreal. The woman who had an affair with Christopher was here while Christopher himself was absent. Pushing herself to sit up, Elena locked eyes with her mother. "Mom, I need to know why she's here," she said, her voice quivering. Margaret frowned, but nodded in understanding. Peter, sensing his daughter's turmoil, quickly stepped out to confront Vanessa. Moments later, Peter returned, his face tinged with disgust. "She says Christopher asked her to come. He's off in Los Angeles. Vanessa claims he couldn't get a flight back in time, and he insisted someone be here to take care of you." His voice turned bitter at the last phrase. Elena let out a harsh, exhausted laugh. "She's here to take care of me?" she repeated sarcastically, feeling the sting of betrayal in every syllable. Where was this concern when he was lying to me for months? Margaret looked torn between comfort and outrage. "Elena, focus on your recovery. We'll handle this." Elena nodded weakly, but she felt a flash of anger fueling her. Summoning what little strength she had left, she asked a passing nurse to request Vanessa's presence. The nurse looked uncertain but complied. Within moments, Vanessa entered, her posture oddly composed, her designer coat spotless despite the tension. Elena's voice trembled as she spoke. "Why are you here, Vanessa? Really?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no immediate words formed. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an exit. Finally she managed. "Christopher called me when he heard you were in labor. He couldn't get away from his business meeting in time." Elena stared at Vanessa, stunned by the audacity of that statement. The mention of "couldn't get away" made her entire being quake with anger. "So you're the stand-in?" she asked, her tone icy. "My husband's mistress arrives to support me while I give birth to his child?" Vanessa looked flustered. "I just wanted to help. You have no place here," Margaret interrupted, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "Elena's just given birth, and you are a source of distress. Leave." Vanessa's face hardened, as if a mask of courtesy had fallen away. "Christopher isn't a monster, you know," she said softly, almost in defiance. "He just felt trapped. The word echoed in Elena's mind. Was that how Christopher had come to view their marriage, their child? A prison cell from which he sought escape through another woman? Margaret's anger flared. "Get out before I call security." Without another word, Vanessa turned on her heel and left, high heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Silence settled in the room, broken only by the hum of medical machinery. Elena's fists clenched around the bedsheets. She fought back tears, not wanting to appear weak, but the enormity of her husband's betrayal was almost too much to bear. She had done nothing but love Christopher, trust him, and devote herself to building a life with him. And in her moment of greatest vulnerability, he couldn't even be bothered to show up. Instead, he sent the very woman who had stolen his affections. Holding onto her mother's hand, Elena closed her eyes. Let them see her tears. Let them see her heartbreak. Because from this moment forward, something in her had changed forever. Elena spent the following days recovering in the hospital. Baby Ethan was placed in the neonatal unit for precautionary observation, though doctors reassured her. He was healthy enough to go home soon. Each day, Elena visited Ethan, pressing kisses to his tiny forehead, whispering promises that they would weather the storm together. Margaret and Peter Redwood remained by her side, bringing fresh clothes and homemade meals. Aunt Cynthia flew in from Nashville, her vivacious warmth balancing the cold sense of betrayal lingering in the air. Christopher was notably absent. Instead, Elena received a single text message from him. "Sorry I couldn't make it. Hope you and the baby are okay. No calls, no personal visit, no apology worthy of the pain he had caused." Anger and humiliation consumed Elena. She began avoiding calls from acquaintances who knew she was due to give birth. Rumors were swirling. People whispered that Christopher Harrington, the powerful millionaire, had left his wife in her most vulnerable hour. Some were sympathetic, others were vultures craving gossip. Elena found no energy to handle the attention. Vanessa Quinn, too, became an object of swirling gossip. Word spread that she was effectively acting as Christopher's personal liaison while he was in Los Angeles, a role that might be more than professional. Amelia Dunbar, who still worked at Harrington Enterprises, provided occasional updates, though Elena never asked for them. According to Amelia, Christopher had grown increasingly brazen about his relationship with Vanessa. Desperate for closure, Elena considered confronting Christopher directly once she was discharged from the hospital, but Dr. Quince advised her to focus on her postpartum recovery. Stress could easily lead to complications, affecting both her health and Ethan's. So Elena complied, burying her urges and focusing on her baby. The day she finally brought Ethan home was bittersweet. She set up his nursery in one of the mansion's spare bedrooms, a pastel-colored haven stocked with diapers, blankets, and plush toys. But as she tucked Ethan into his crib, she couldn't help but notice the emptiness. This was supposed to be a shared moment of joy, with Christopher by her side, celebrating the new addition to their family. Instead, she felt like she was occupying a house that no longer felt like a home. That very evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the front doors swung open. Christopher stepped inside, suitcase in hand. He found Elena in the living room, holding Ethan close. For a moment, he hesitated, as if uncertain how to greet the child he had abandoned. Elena's eyes locked onto his, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You missed it," she said, each word laced with anger and heartbreak. "You missed the moment your son came into this world." Christopher's gaze flickered between Elena and the baby. He seemed momentarily contrite, or at least too stunned to speak. "Work was insane, Elena," he muttered, setting down his suitcase. "I tried to get back in time, but flights were cancelled, then delayed. It was all beyond my control." Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to hurl every accusation, every bit of evidence of his affair at him, but a single question escaped her lips. Then why send Vanessa? He had no ready answer. His expression turned defensive, and he averted his eyes. Look, I knew you'd need support, and she was already in town. My parents are traveling in Europe. I felt you shouldn't be alone. Alone." The word burned through her. "I wasn't alone," she said firmly. "My parents were there, along with the doctors and nurses unlike you." His composure faltered, but he quickly recovered, adopting the tone he used in business negotiations. "Elena, we need to talk about our situation. I understand you're upset, but maybe we can come to an arrangement." "Arrangement?" she echoed, disbelief turning her voice cold. "You mean hush money? Divorce settlement? Or perhaps an open marriage so you can flaunt Vanessa whenever it suits you?" Christopher sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Don't be melodramatic," he snapped. "I'm just saying things have changed. Because I gave birth to your child?" she asked, voice trembling. "Or because you're cheating on me with Vanessa Quinn?" A beat of silence. Christopher didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply lowered his head. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "I haven't been honest with you," fury flared in Elena. "Honest. You haven't been human." She wanted to scream, to release all the pent-up heartbreak. Ethan stirred in her arms, reminding her she had someone else to think about now. Someone small and vulnerable. She couldn't collapse under the weight of her anger. She had to remain strong. Christopher moved as if to touch Ethan, but Elena recoiled, turning away. With a huff of frustration, he picked up his suitcase. "I'll give you space," he muttered, heading toward the bedroom they once shared. "We can talk in the morning." He left Elena standing in the living room, tears silently carving paths down her cheeks as she held Ethan close. She was done expecting comfort from the man who had broken her heart. All that mattered now was protecting her son from the poison that Christopher and his mistress represented. The following morning, Elena woke to the sounds of the staff preparing breakfast downstairs. She had barely slept. Her mind raced through 100 different scenarios of how to proceed. Should she demand a separation? Take Ethan and move back with her parents? Sue Christopher for custody and child support. Steeling herself, she placed Ethan in his bassinet and walked down to the formal dining room. Christopher was already seated, sipping black coffee as though this were any ordinary day. He glanced up, looking slightly uncomfortable. "We need to figure out what's best for Ethan," Elena began, her voice surprisingly calm. Christopher nodded, setting his mug aside. "I agree. He deserves stability, which is why I think you and I should come to a financial arrangement." He paused, eyeing Elena carefully. Elena's stomach churned. "You mean you want me to step aside so you can be with Vanessa?" she said bitterly. "And in return, you'll fund my life and Ethan's?" "Don't phrase it like that," Christopher said, scowling. "I'm just trying to be practical. I'm willing to provide for you and Ethan. I can set up a trust fund that ensures he'll have everything he needs: education, healthcare, property." Elena's jaw clenched. She couldn't believe this was the same man she once adored. "And what about love, Christopher? What about being there when he takes his first steps, speaks his first words? Or is that something you'd rather Vanessa handle?" He looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. "Elena, love is complicated. We had our time. Things change." She felt a stab of pain, as if the final nail had been hammered into the coffin of their marriage. "I see," she whispered. She folded her hands, gathering every ounce of her remaining dignity. "You know, if you had just been honest from the start, if you had admitted you were seeing someone else before I went into labor, maybe we could have handled this differently. But you left me in the hospital, at the mercy of your mistress, while I was giving birth to our son." Christopher had the decency to look remorseful, but he said nothing. That silence hurt more than any heated argument could have, because it meant he couldn't muster an apology deep enough or real enough to bridge the gap between them. She stood, her limbs shaking with suppressed rage. "I'll be staying in Ethan's nursery for now. Once I've recovered enough, I'll decide what's next. But understand this, Christopher, no matter how much money you throw around, you have forfeited the right to call yourself a husband to me." He didn't protest. Perhaps he sensed the finality in her voice. Elena left the dining room, feeling a fleeting sense of victory mixed with profound heartbreak. Over the next week, Christopher made several attempts to talk to Elena. Sometimes he dropped by the nursery, trying to bond with Ethan. The baby, of course, was too young to recognize or reject him. Yet Elena couldn't shake the unease she felt every time Christopher leaned over Ethan's crib. How could a man who had inflicted such emotional torment on the mother claim paternal rights with a straight face? Vanessa, ironically, stayed away from the mansion. Instead, she contacted Elena through Amelia, suggesting they have a civil discussion. Elena refused, focusing on her recovery and Ethan's care. In quiet moments, She found herself replaying the memory of Vanessa strolling into the hospital. Each replay sharpened her resolve to protect Ethan from that toxic influence. Meanwhile, Christopher's public image was beginning to take a hit. Gossip columns and online forums buzzed with rumors that the powerful CEO had missed his child's birth. Reporters clamored outside Harrington Enterprises, hoping for a statement. On social media, the hashtag #HeartlessHarrington began trending in local circles. Rumors floated that major investors were losing confidence in Christopher's leadership, especially after he allowed his personal life to become tabloid fodder. Sensing his empire in jeopardy, Christopher attempted damage control. He called a press conference to address rumors about his family. But instead of a heartfelt apology, the speech came off as cold and strategic. He praised Elena as a wonderful woman and acknowledged the birth of his son, but he avoided revealing the nature of his relationship with Vanessa. The public saw through the facade. They wanted sincerity, not more corporate speak. Elena watched the press conference from the nursery, Ethan asleep in her arms. She felt a pang of disappointment, but not surprise. Christopher was determined to salvage his reputation by any means necessary, even if that meant feigning concern for her and Ethan. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived at the mansion, addressed to Elena. Inside, she found preliminary divorce papers. An attached note in Christopher's handwriting read, "Let's make this easy on both of us." Easy. As if walking away from their marriage and the life they built could ever be easy. Elena set the papers aside, fury coursing through her veins. If a divorce was inevitable, fine, but she would not be sidelined or bought off. She and her child deserved more. Thus, she reached out to Aunt Cynthia, who referred her to a high-profile attorney named James Sinclair, a longtime friend of the Redwood family. James was known for his fierce advocacy on behalf of his clients, and Elena needed someone who wouldn't be intimidated by Christopher's wealth. When Elena met James in his tastefully furnished office, she clutched a photograph of Ethan in her hand, a reminder of who she was fighting for. James listened intently as she explained the situation, from the affair to Christopher's attempt at a hush-money arrangement. "Your case is strong," James said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "If Christopher is as worried about public image as you say, then he might settle quietly to avoid further scandal. But given his personality type, he could also dig in his heels." Elena nodded, determined. "I don't want to destroy him. I just want to ensure that Ethan and I are safe, financially and emotionally." James placed a comforting hand on the table. "We'll get you that, and if Christopher wants a fight, we'll be ready." Stepping out of James's office, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer the naive young woman who believed love conquered all. She was a mother now, and she would fight with every breath for her child's well-being. And if that meant going toe-to-toe with Christopher Harrington, so be it. As legal proceedings began to take shape, Christopher's attitude shifted from indifferent to aggressive. One afternoon, after a tense meeting with his corporate lawyers, he stormed into the mansion, slamming doors behind him. He found Elena in the nursery, cradling Ethan, who had just fallen asleep. "Why are you doing this?" Christopher snarled, his voice low to avoid waking the baby. Elena glared up at him. "You served me divorce papers, remember? I'm simply protecting my son and myself. You made your choice. Now face the consequences." He clenched his jaw, eyes darting to the sleeping child. "I could fight for full custody," he threatened, crossing his arms. "Don't underestimate my resources, Elena. The courts favor financial stability. I can give Ethan everything." She stiffened. "You think you can take my child from me after what you did? You abandoned us. You're unfit to be a father in the emotional sense, no matter how much money you have." Christopher's nostrils flared, but he said nothing further. He stormed out, leaving Elena trembling with a mix of anger and fear. She knew the law could be twisted by powerful men, but she also believed in James Sinclair's words. The truth was on her side. 2 days later, an unexpected visitor arrived. Vanessa Quinn, her impeccable makeup and stylish clothes in stark contrast to Elena's simple postpartum attire. A chill ran through Elena as the butler announced Vanessa was at the door, requesting an audience for the sake of clearing the air. Elena almost refused, but a strange sense of curiosity and a simmering need for confrontation pushed her to accept. She led Vanessa into the living room, away from the nursery, mindful not to subject Ethan to any more negativity. Vanessa began by trying to appear conciliatory. "Elena, I'm not here to antagonize you. I understand you have every right to be furious." Elena folded her arms. "Then get to the point." A fleeting emotion, perhaps regret, passed over Vanessa's face, but it vanished quickly. "Christopher told me he wants this divorce to go smoothly. But you've hired a shark, James Sinclair. Christopher's lawyers say it'll get messy." Elena smirked. "Messy for him, maybe. Did he send you here to do his bidding? Or is this your personal crusade?" Vanessa took a measured breath. "I know what you must think of me. But Christopher and we fell in love. It happened gradually. I never intended to hurt you." "Stop," Elena hissed, eyes flashing with anger. "You don't get to claim innocence while betraying another woman. You paraded into my hospital room the day I gave birth. How much more hurtful could you be?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "Fine, I won't pretend anymore. Christopher chose me. You can hate me all you want, but that won't change the outcome." Elena's voice trembled with fury. "And what outcome is that?" "That he and I will build a life together once your marriage is dissolved," Vanessa said, raising her chin defiantly. "He wants joint custody of Ethan, and I'm prepared to help him fight for it." A wave of nausea swept over Elena. She imagined her precious baby living under the same roof as Vanessa. The thought was unbearable, yet Elena refused to crumble. She stood tall, meeting Vanessa's gaze head-on. "We'll see what the courts decide," she said coldly. "Now get out of my home." Vanessa flashed a smirk as if anticipating a victory. She rose and headed for the door, pausing only to deliver a final barb. "Christopher will have everything he wants, Elena. You might as well accept it." Elena didn't respond. She watched Vanessa leave, a singular resolve solidifying within her, no matter what it took. She would never let them tear Ethan away from her. As anticipated, the divorce proceedings became a high-profile spectacle. Paparazzi swarmed the courthouse steps, and tabloids ran sensational headlines. Millionaire Christopher Harrington locked in custody battle, and scorned wife takes on CEO. Elena's first day in court was a whirlwind. James Sinclair presented evidence of Christopher's extramarital affair, including the receipt for the engraved bracelet. He also highlighted Christopher's absence during the birth of his son, an abandonment that showcased a disturbing lack of paternal concern. Christopher's legal team tried to spin the narrative, painting Elena as emotionally unstable and ill-equipped to raise Ethan independently. They argued Christopher's wealth provided a superior environment for the child's development. The tension was palpable, with cameras flashing every time either party exited the courtroom. Throughout the trial, Elena maintained a stoic composure, bolstered by James's counsel. She refused to let Christopher's venomous tactics break her. Meanwhile, Christopher, seated alongside Vanessa in the gallery, showed little remorse for the heartbreak he'd caused. On the final day of the custody hearing, Elena took the stand. She recounted how Christopher had disappeared during her labor, sending Vanessa in his stead. She spoke of her devotion to Ethan, her stable extended family, and her plan to raise him in a nurturing environment. She concluded with a pointed remark, her voice trembling with genuine emotion. "I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for Ethan's right to have a loving, present parent." When Christopher took the stand, he attempted to appear contrite, but came off as rehearsed. He blamed business obligations for his absence, emphasizing that any father in a demanding career might miss important family moments. The presiding judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Teresa Leonard, asked pointed questions about Christopher's extramarital relationship and whether it overshadowed his responsibilities as a husband and father. His evasive answers didn't seem to impress her. At the end, Judge Leonard announced she would take all evidence under advisement before issuing a ruling. Tension gripped everyone as they waited for her decision. In the days leading up to Judge Leonard's ruling, Elena found herself overwhelmed by worry. She knew Christopher's legal team might still manipulate the situation. Each time she looked at Ethan's innocent face, fear stabbed her heart. What if the judge granted Christopher joint custody? Could she stomach sending her baby off to live part-time with Vanessa? Just when hope seemed dim, an unexpected visitor arrived at Elena's temporary apartment. She had moved out of the mansion for her own peace of mind. The doorman announced a Mr. Oliver Crane, a top executive from Harrington Enterprises. Elena had never met him personally, though she knew of his reputation as Christopher's right-hand man. Curious and wary, Elena allowed Oliver inside. He was a tall, middle-aged man with kind eyes and a nervous demeanor. After a few pleasantries, he confessed why he was there. "I've worked with Christopher for almost a decade," Oliver began, clearing his throat. "Lately, he's changed. His affair with Vanessa is just one symptom of bigger issues. He's become reckless, uncaring about the harm he causes." Elena studied him, still cautious. "Why tell me this?" Oliver sighed. "I've come across documents that prove Christopher engaged in some questionable business practices. If these get out, he'll be under immense scrutiny from regulators. It would cripple his attempts to prove he's a fit parent." A swirl of emotions flooded Elena. She didn't want to blackmail Christopher, nor did she want to stoop to his level of ruthless scheming. But she couldn't ignore that Oliver's revelations might be the key to securing Ethan's future. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Oliver hesitated. "Because I've seen how good you were for Christopher. When you two first married, you humanized him. I'm ashamed to be part of a company that condones his behavior now. And I believe Ethan deserves better." Elena nodded, tears prickling her eyes. She didn't want to rely on shady documents to win her case, but she also had to protect Ethan. "Send them to James Sinclair," she said quietly. "Let him decide if they're necessary for our defense." Oliver nodded and left as quietly as he had come, leaving Elena with a renewed sense of possibility. She prayed they wouldn't have to resort to dirty tactics. Yet, in her darkest moments, she conceded that sometimes, to fight monsters, one must wield the very weapons they fear most. Finally, the day arrived when Judge Teresa Leonard would issue her ruling. The courtroom was packed with reporters, onlookers, and supporters from both sides. Elena, dressed in a modest navy blue suit, clutched a photograph of Ethan in her hand. Christopher entered with Vanessa at his side, exuding an air of confidence. He glanced briefly at Elena, but she saw no warmth in his eyes. Judge Leonard addressed the court, recounting the key points of the custody case. She criticized Christopher's absences, his affair, and his blatant disregard for Elena's well-being during childbirth. She also acknowledged his ability to provide financially for Ethan. When she spoke the final words, Elena's heart hammered against her chest. "It is the judgment of this court that physical custody of the minor child shall remain solely with his mother, Elena Redwood Harrington. Christopher Harrington shall be granted supervised visitation until such time as he can demonstrate a consistent interest in the child's welfare." Stunned silence filled the courtroom. Elena closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had won. Ethan was safe. Christopher stood, fuming. "Supervised visitation," he exclaimed, outraged. Judge Leonard leveled him with a calm stare. "Your repeated absences and questionable behavior have demonstrated a lack of paternal commitment. This is the best outcome for Ethan. If you truly care for your son, Mr. Harrington, prove it by showing up and acting like a father." Vanessa tugged on Christopher's arm, urging him to calm down, but her presence only fueled the tabloid's cameras. They captured the anger etched into Christopher's face, the dismay on Vanessa's. Meanwhile, Elena tried to contain her relief, tears slipping from her eyes. Later, outside the courthouse, reporters rushed forward, thrusting microphones toward Elena. She mustered a polite statement. "I'm grateful to the court for recognizing what's best for my son. I hope we can all move forward with respect for Ethan's well-being." With that, she walked away from the throng of flashing cameras, baby Ethan's future secure in her arms. Her parents and Aunt Cynthia greeted her with open arms, tears of joy in their eyes. But the story was not entirely over. After the ruling, Christopher faced mounting pressure regarding his business practices. It turned out the documents Oliver Crane had leaked to James were already under investigation by the authorities. Harrington Enterprises was forced to scale back some of its more aggressive expansions. Christopher's iron grip on the company began to loosen. Vanessa, sensing the downturn, distanced herself from the scandal. Rumors circulated that she was considering leaving Christopher for greener pastures. The so-called love they shared frayed under the weight of legal battles and public scrutiny. In the end, Christopher found himself largely alone, left to reflect on how his pursuit of power and pleasure cost him a family he never truly appreciated. Months later, Elena and Ethan were thriving in a cozy home near Willow Creek. Margaret and Peter Redwood visited often, showering their grandson with love. Aunt Cynthia popped in whenever she was in town, bringing fresh flowers from her travels and reading stories to Ethan. Elena maintained a cordial but limited relationship with Christopher, primarily through scheduled, supervised visits. To her surprise, Christopher showed small signs of genuine remorse. He arrived promptly for each visit, displaying awkward attempts at fatherly affection. Whether this signaled a deeper transformation or was just an act, Elena couldn't be sure. She remained vigilant, placing Ethan's well-being above all else. Through therapy, meditation, and the unwavering support of her family, Elena healed from the emotional wounds of betrayal. She also resumed her philanthropic work, expanding her aunt's Redwood Foundation to focus on providing resources for single parents. The heartbreak she endured became a source of empathy, fueling her mission to support others. As for Vanessa Quinn, she faded into the background, remembered only as the mistress who tried and failed to break a mother's spirit. In the end, it was Elena's unwavering devotion to her child that triumphed over all obstacles. And in that victory, she found the strength to forge a brighter future, free from the shadows of Christopher's betrayal. Thank you for staying with us through this roller coaster of heartbreak and hope, betrayal and resilience. Elena Harrington's journey reminds us that not even the cold, hard grasp of wealth can stifle a mother's unwavering love for her child. From an opulent mansion to a high-stakes courtroom, Elena fought with every fiber of her being to secure a safe, loving future for baby Ethan, proving that sometimes the greatest riches we can possess are courage, integrity, and the power to stand our ground. If you found yourself moved by this story or know someone who might be inspired by Elena's perseverance, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends and family who love real-life drama fiction, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of empowerment, scandal, and redemption. Your engagement makes all the difference, so stay tuned for more dramatic storytelling adventures.